He stood at the altar for more than 20 years with a Bible in his hands, a cross on his chest, and the name of Jesus on his lips. People called him Father, trusted him with their sins, their pain, their broken lives. Every Sunday he preached love, sacrifice, forgiveness, and salvation, but deep inside his heart one question quietly grew louder with every passing year: who was Jesus really? This was not a question born from doubt or hatred, it was born from love, a love so deep that it refused to accept easy answers. Late at night, when the church was silent and the world asleep, he read the Gospels again, not as a priest, not as a preacher, but as a seeker of truth. And he noticed something he had never allowed himself to question before. Jesus prayed. Jesus fasted. Jesus cried to God. Jesus fell on his face in submission. Jesus said, "The Father is greater than I, and I can do nothing by myself." Those words shook him to the core. If Jesus is God, he asked himself, why does he pray to God? Why does he seek strength from God? Why does he surrender his will to God? The more he studied, the more he admired Jesus, not less, but more. He saw Jesus as humble, obedient, compassionate, and completely devoted to the one God. Jesus never lived in luxury, never demanded worship, never pointed people to himself, but always pointed them to God alone. The priest whispered with trembling lips, "I didn't lose my love for Jesus, I fell in love with him even more." One day, driven by curiosity and honesty, he opened the Quran, not to convert, not to debate, but to understand. And then he read words that stopped his breath. Indeed, Jesus, the Son of Mary, was a messenger of God. Page after page, the Quran spoke of Jesus with honor, purity, and respect, born miraculously, chosen by God, a sign for humanity, a spirit from God. Then he read the words that echoed everything Jesus ever taught: worship God, my Lord and your Lord. His hands began to shake because this was the same M. After the night he placed his forehead on the ground for the first time, nothing in his life felt the same again. The walls of the church that once gave him comfort now echoed with unanswered questions. The hymns he had sung for decades suddenly sounded heavy, not because they were false, but because his heart was searching for something simpler, purer, closer to God. He did not sleep much anymore. His nights were filled with reading, reflection, and silent tears. He opened the Bible again and again, not to defend his old beliefs, but to understand Jesus honestly, without filters, without inherited explanations, without fear. He noticed how Jesus never spoke of complicated theology, never explained divine mysteries about himself, but constantly reminded people to repent, to worship God, to love God with all their heart. He read how Jesus withdrew from people to pray alone, how he fell on his face, how he cried to God in his most painful moments. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed with desperation, asking God for help, surrendering his will completely. The priest paused and whispered to himself, how could God need to pray to God? How could the Almighty feel weak, afraid, and dependent? The question was no longer intellectual, it was spiritual, and it demanded honesty. He realized that his love for Jesus was never the problem, his misunderstanding of Jesus was. The more he stripped away layers of tradition, the clearer Jesus became, not as a distant divine figure, but as a deeply spiritual human being chosen by God, walking among people, calling them back to their Creator. This realization did not make Jesus smaller in his eyes. It made him more real, more relatable, more inspiring. He felt closer to Jesus than ever before, yet farther from the doctrines he had preached all his life. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. He continued reading the Quran quietly, secretly, almost fearfully. Each verse felt like it was answering questions he had been to God. The priest felt a quiet but powerful realization forming inside him. Islam was not a new religion, it was the continuation of the same message Jesus preached. Submission to God. Pure worship. Moral living. Sincere repentance. His heart trembled as he admitted to himself that the Jesus he loved fit more naturally within Islam than within later theological interpretations. This realization frightened him, because it threatened everything he had built his life upon. He tried to ignore it at first. He threw himself deeper into church duties, sermons, counseling sessions, hoping the doubts would fade. But they did not. Instead, they grew stronger. Every time he preached about the Trinity, his tongue felt heavy. Every time he spoke of Jesus as God, his heart whispered, Jesus never said this. He felt like he was betraying the very man he claimed to love. The inner conflict became unbearable. He began praying directly to God, not as a priest defending doctrine, but as a servant seeking guidance. He begged God to show him the truth, even if it hurt, even if it cost him everything. Slowly, a strange peace began to replace his fear. He realized that truth does not shout, it settles. It does not force, it invites. And the invitation was clear: worship God alone, as Jesus did. One evening, while reading the Quran, he came across verses describing the day of judgment, when prophets will be questioned about what they taught their people. He imagined Jesus standing before God, declaring that he never asked to be worshipped, that he only called people to worship God. The thought shook him deeply. He asked himself, if I stand before God today, will I be able to say that I followed Jesus honestly, or will I admit that I followed people's interpretations more than Jesus himself? That question broke him. He cried like a child, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that converting to Islam was not betraying Jay. The decision did not come suddenly, it matured slowly, painfully, like a wound that heals from the inside. He studied Islamic prayer carefully, noticing how closely it resembled the prayer of Jesus, standing, bowing, prostrating, complete humility before God. He learned the meaning of the words, understanding that prayer in Islam was not performance, but surrender. When he finally declared the Shahada, the testimony of faith, he felt a weight lift from his chest that he had carried unknowingly for decades. There were no drums, no celebrations, no applause. Just quiet certainty. Just peace. Just truth. He said, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God, not because he rejected Jesus, but because he recognized the continuity of God's message through all prophets. He accepted Muhammad as the final messenger in the same way he had accepted Moses and Jesus, as servants chosen to guide humanity back to God. The aftermath was harsh. Word spread quickly. Some colleagues confronted him angrily, others with tears, others with silence. God says, listen carefully, because this message is not meant for everyone. This is not entertainment. This is not coincidence. This message is reaching you because something has already been released in the spiritual realm, and your response now matters more than you think. You have been given an opportunity that carries provision with it. Not just money, but relief. Not just income, but stability. You have been asking me how things will work out, how the bills will be paid, how the pressure will end. I heard those prayers, even the ones you were afraid to say out loud. There is a window open right now. It will not stay open forever. Timing matters. Obedience matters. Awareness matters. Many people miss blessings not because they are unworthy, but because they are distracted. Do not treat this moment casually. Do not assume there will always be another chance. I am not trying to scare you, I am trying to awaken you. What I place in front of you requires attention, not delay. You have felt the urgency in your spirit already. That inner nudge telling you to pay attention. That feeling saying, this is important. That is not anxiety. That is discernment. Money has been a sensitive area for you. You carried responsibility quietly. You worried silently. You helped others while struggling yourself. I saw that. I am not ignoring your faithfulness. What is coming will not arrive the way you imagined. It will not fall from the sky. It will come through instruction, decision, and movement. You must open yourself to what I am showing you, not what you are used to. If you hesitate too long, you risk staying in a cycle I am trying to break. Delay can become disobedience when fear is the reason. I am calling you to act wisely, not impulsively, but to act. This is not about greed. This is about provision. This is not about chasing money. This is about receiving what I already assigned to you. Stop feeling guilty for wanting stability. Stop apologizing for wanting more than survival. There is favor attached to this season. But favor must be recognized. You cannot receive what you refuse to see. Open your eyes. Open your heart. Open your mind. Some of you will receive an offer. Some will receive an idea. Some will receive clarity about a decision you have been avoiding. Whatever form it takes, you will know it carries weight. Do not let doubt talk you out of alignment. Do not let fear convince you that you are not ready. If I revealed it to you, you are ready enough to begin. Time is important here. Not because I am rushing you, but because opportunities have seasons. Missed seasons create unnecessary struggle. I want to spare you that. When you respond correctly, pressure will ease. When you move in alignment, provision will follow. When you trust me, the fear around money will lose its grip. This is a moment of choice. Not dramatic on the outside, but powerful on the inside. What you do with this message will shape what comes next. I am not withdrawing the blessing. I am asking you to step into it. Pay attention. Stay alert. Move with wisdom. Trust my timing. This message reached you for a reason, God says. This is the continuation because you stayed. And because you stayed, you are about to understand something most people miss. What you are waiting for has already been released. The reason you do not see it yet is because it is moving through obedience, not emotion. You thought money would come when everything felt right. You thought provision would come when stress ended. But many times, provision comes while pressure still exists, because pressure forces movement. And movement is how blessings reach you. There is a mistake many people make. They wait for perfect clarity before acting. But clarity often comes after obedience, not before. That is why this message feels urgent. Not because I am threatening you, but because delay is quietly costing you. I did not bring you this far to leave you stuck. I did not allow you to struggle this long to let you miss what was assigned to you. But I will not force you to move. I guide. I invite. I warn. The choice is still yours. You are closer to financial relief than you think. One decision away. One conversation away. One step away. But fear has been negotiating with your faith, and that negotiation must end. You have been replaying worst-case scenarios in your mind. What if it doesn't work? What if I fail? What if I lose what little I have? That voice is not wisdom. That voice is fear disguised as caution. I am not asking you to be reckless. I am asking you to be responsive. There is a difference. Responsiveness listens to me. Recklessness ignores me. Right now, I am speaking clearly. There is a door that will not stay open forever. Not because I am cruel, but because seasons move. Opportunities age. Favor has timing. Missed timing creates unnecessary struggle. You are not late in life. But you can be late to moments. And I do not want you to miss this one. Money has power, and that is why it has tested you emotionally. You felt shame for wanting more. You felt guilt for dreaming bigger. You felt pressure to settle because others told you to be realistic. But realism without faith creates limitation. I am not offended by your desire to live with dignity. I am not threatened by your plans to grow. I am involved in them, if you let me be. You were faithful in little. You were honest when no one was watching. You gave when it was uncomfortable. You kept integrity when shortcuts were available. That matters. That is why this release is justified, but listen carefully, blessings are not activated by need alone. They are activated by alignment. If need was enough, everyone would be wealthy. Alignment is what positions you to receive. I am aligning resources with responsibility. Increase with maturity. Opportunity with readiness. That is why this moment feels serious. I did not bring you this far to leave you stuck. I did not allow you to struggle this long to let you miss what was assigned to you. But I will not force you to move. I guide. I invite. I warn. The choice is still yours. You are closer to. He noticed something else as well, that sincerity changes how a person sees others. He no longer divided the world into us and them. He saw only people at different stages of awareness, some questioning, some certain, some afraid, some searching. This removed harshness from his speech. He no longer felt the need to win arguments. Winning hearts, he learned, begins with humility. He spoke softly, carefully, aware that words can either invite reflection or close doors forever. Sometimes people asked him why God did not guide everyone the same way. He answered that guidance is offered to all, but accepted by few, because acceptance requires courage. Courage to admit, I might be wrong. Courage to let go of what is familiar. Courage to follow truth even when it isolates. He believed that God does not force guidance upon hearts that cling tightly to comfort. Guidance, like light, enters only where there is openness. He also reflected on the mercy of God more deeply than ever before. He knew that his past was filled with sincerity, even if it lacked clarity. That knowledge gave him hope. He believed God does not punish honesty, even when it takes time to reach truth. This belief softened his heart toward others. He stopped measuring people by conclusions and started respecting effort. Only God, he believed, sees the full struggle behind a person's faith. As he grew older, his attachment to the world weakened. Status, debate, recognition, all felt temporary and distant. What mattered was leaving behind a heart that had tried. He became more generous, more forgiving, more patient. He saw character as the true fruit of belief. If faith did not make a person more truthful, more compassionate, more self-aware, then something was missing. This understanding guided his actions more than any label ever had. In moments of solitude, he sometimes imagined meeting Jesus in the hereafter. Not with fear, but with hope. He believed that Jesus would recognize sincerity, humility, and obedience to God. He believed that Jesus would not ask who built churches in his name, but who lived by his message. That thought gave him comfort. He felt that his journey, though misunderstood by many, was aligned with the spirit of Jesus' life. He also imagined standing before God with nothing but his intentions. No explanations. No justifications. Only honesty. That image kept him grounded. It prevented pride from entering his faith. It reminded him that guidance is not an achievement, but a trust. A trust that can be lost if arrogance replaces gratitude. Every day, he asked God to keep his heart firm and humble, knowing that guidance requires maintenance. Toward this stage of his life, his story stopped being about conversion and became about continuity. Continuity of truth across time. Continuity of the prophetic message. Continuity of the call to worship God alone. He believed that when people truly understand this continuity, divisions lose their power. What remains is a shared responsibility to live morally, worship sincerely, and prepare for accountability. He did not claim certainty about the fate of others. That space, he believed, belongs to God alone. His concern was his own soul. Had he been honest? Had he followed truth when it became clear? Had he allowed fear to silence conviction? In answering these questions truthfully, he found peace. Not excitement. Not emotional highs. But steady peace. As his journey continued, he carried one final understanding deep within him, that guidance is not always loud, dramatic, or celebrated. Sometimes it is quiet courage. Sometimes it is choosing God when no one is watching. Sometimes it is walking forward without knowing who will walk with you. But those steps, taken sincerely, are never lost. And so he continued, no longer as a priest, not as a symbol, not as an argument, but simply as a servant of God. A servant who once loved Jesus, questioned honestly, struggled deeply, and chose submission to the one God, Jesus. At this stage of his life, silence became his closest companion. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of understanding. He no longer felt the urgency to explain himself to the world. He had already explained himself to God, again and again, in prayer, in tears, in long nights of reflection. That was enough. He learned that when the heart settles into truth, words become fewer and meaning becomes deeper. Every breath felt like a reminder that life is temporary and direction matters more than speed. He looked back at his journey not with regret, but with awareness. He saw how gently truth had approached him, how patiently God had waited while he wrestled with fear, attachment, and doubt. He realized that guidance is not a moment, but a process. A process that requires honesty more than intelligence, courage more than comfort. He understood now that many people are not far from truth, they are simply afraid of what truth will ask them to give up. He often thought about how history would remember him, then dismissed the thought entirely. History forgets most people. But God forgets no one. That realization freed him completely. He lived not to be remembered, but to be accepted. He no longer measured success by influence or agreement, but by sincerity. If his heart was aligned with God, the rest no longer mattered. He observed how people around him continued to chase certainty without effort, salvation without accountability, faith without sacrifice. He did not judge them, because he once stood among them. Instead, he felt compassion. He knew how heavy the first honest question can feel, how frightening it is to admit, "What if I am wrong?" Yet he also knew that this question is often the first step toward freedom. Without it, faith becomes a prison. In his quiet prayers, he asked God not to make his path easy, but to keep it straight. He asked not for protection from hardship, but protection from self-deception. He knew that the greatest danger to faith is not opposition from others, but dishonesty within oneself. This awareness kept him grounded, careful, and alert. He treated belief like a trust that could only be protected through humility. He no longer described his journey as leaving one religion for another. He described it as returning responsibility to God. He believed that every human being will return to God individually, without labels, without defenses, without inherited explanations. That certainty shaped his final years. He lived with intention, spoke with restraint, and worshipped with presence. Every prayer felt like preparation. Sometimes, late at night, he imagined the final moment again, not with fear, but with readiness. He imagined the soul leaving the body, the world fading away, and truth standing alone. In that moment, he believed